You're listening to the #1 news commentary podcast in Macedonia. We pause now for the Macedonian national anthem. Today, over Macedonia is born. The new son of liberty. The Macedonians fight for their own rights. Do not cry, dear Mother Macedonia, because Brian and James are here with an all-new episode of the Clean Energy Show.
Hello and welcome to episode 149 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. We have for you this week. It's time to declare Toyota totally dead. Call in the doctor. Time of death, the introduction of episode 149 of the Clean Energy Show.
That's right, James. The CEO of Toyota has stepped down. A tearful Akio Toyota said in a statement he just couldn't bear Brian and James mocking him on the Clean Energy Show.
Coward. And I learned that lots of Chinese homes burn coal right in the house. And I felt bad for burning my toast the other day.
British Petroleum has released an outlook report that says they believe oil demand peaked in 2019. The only thing they could do at this point to increase oil output is another Gulf of Mexico disaster like the Deepwater Horizon. They're currently negotiating with Mark Wahlberg to star in the disaster movie sequel.
All that and more on this show, including our local airport is capturing carbon. I don't know why I shop for a cheap EV. That saga continues. An exclusive prediction about Robi-taxi fleets from me, James Whittingham, co-host of the Clean Energy Show. All that and more this week.
So my furnace is making a weird noise.
What? That's not good?
Yeah. I thought, I would be sitting like watching a movie in my basement and I would hear this noise and it sounded like maybe my Blu-ray player was like spinning up and spinning down. It sounded like that, like a, so I actually unplugged the Blu-ray player because I thought it was just making a weird noise.
Wow.
I don't know. It's coming from the furnace, so I'm a little concerned.
I'm stumped. Unless it's a hamster on a wheel.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I forgot we got hamsters.
But you had a fairly new furnace, a hamster-free one, I would assume.
Well, it's getting to be about 12 years old now, but the motor was replaced a couple of years ago. So I was reading the local newspaper, like I do sometimes, and our airport here in our city is installing this carbon capture device on, it's going to basically be on their furnace, I think, like their furnace and maybe their hot water heat. It's not a particularly big airport. We're a smaller city. Anyway, they're going to install these devices and capture carbon and turn the carbon into soap. Have you heard of this before?
Yes.
Oh, you have?
It's just a PR greenwashing BS, if you ask me.
Okay.
This happens all the time. We can turn carbon into whatever we want. But, that's going to be some expensive soap. It's not like the implication is that we'll make money off this carbon capturing. No, the equipment is very expensive. It requires a lot of maintenance. It doesn't capture everything. And you get a few soap cubes out of it to tell your neighbors that, hey, isn't that cool? No, this is greenwashing bullshit. There, I've said it.
And I suspect, obviously that industry, the whole industry of air travel is probably getting nervous about, getting clamped down upon. So they're trying to preemptively make themselves sound greener, I guess.
Yeah. And they're doing all kinds of announcements and crap. They're tied into the local political oil money and all that's going on here. It's all shit. You want to do something, people? Regina Airport Authority, you want to do something? Put some freaking solar panels up.
Hey.
You got a whole crap load of space between runways. They're not high off the ground. And then put a heat pump in. That's how you do it, baby. And then you'll actually save money. No, you can't make 3 bars of soap out of it that no one's going to buy in your gift shop, carbon soap.
Well, what if the sun reflects off the solar panels and blinds the pilots?
That's a good call.
Okay, we won't do that then. But at least on the roof.
Huh.
But although even that might be a problem.
Well, if all the solar panels were south of the runways, because the runways run southeast, northwest, and east-west, and they are expanding them, by the way, because they want to have bigger planes come in. because they think bigger planes are all the rage. They're not.
In the 1970s, they were all the rage.
Yeah, well, today as we speak, as we record this, the last 747 is being produced ever.
Wow.
Like they're done with them. It's more economical to have 2-engine planes fly shorter distances or even longer distances with the Maxes. They can go the longest distance now.
Yeah.
So the 2-engine planes are more fuel efficient, and fuel is not cheap now, or probably won't ever be.
Yeah.
So
it's like the difference between, a giant monster SUV and then a more economical, smaller car.
I think that's kind of the point. Yeah. And, we live in a place where the FedEx and UPS and all those cargo 747s fly literally over my house, because I have an app, the Flight 24 app, to see why is there so many jets going over, so many big ones? Well, I figured it out. That's what it is. They're all going to Anchorage and then to China or other places in Asia, because they stop in Anchorage because it's cheaper to make that stop and have half a tank of fuel than it is to. But that's kind of the route they take. It's the polar route, the shortest route there. So
I've watched a lot of my packages go through Anchorage when I'm tracking them.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, there you have it. Don't say you've never been to Alaska, because you have in some way, or your products have. So, yeah, that's the thing with that. And one of those planes had to have an emergency landing in our city, Saskatoon, where my kid goes to school, the other day. Was smoke in the cockpit or smoke in the fuselage. Basically, there's a flight crew, but they're still using them as cargo planes, and they expect those to. Oh, this is an interesting fact. There's a certain amount of 747s in the world. I saw this on TV the other day. It's a surprising number of them are private jets, like 40 of them.
Wow.
Which is like a high percentage of them.
Air Force One, maybe?
Air Force One counts. Well, it's counted as a military jet. But there are people so freaky rich in this world
oh, no.
that a normal private jet is not enough. And I think, they're turning them in the restaurants and things and museums and interesting things. But like 40 of them in the world are private jets.
That's
so
crazy.
That's nuts. Like, how much room do you need? Do you have a billiard table in there? I mean, how's that going to work?
One of my favorite movies as a kid was Airport 1975, which is there's a collision. A smaller plane collides with a 747, and then George Kennedy has to land the plane. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, I used to go to those movies as a kid all the time, those disaster movies.
They were great.
Do you remember the one where they went under the ocean?
Yeah, I think that was
one of the sequels.
77 or 80.
Yeah, well, that ended it. But it was like the Titanic, but in a jet, basically. Yeah, and it's probably not factually true. They would break apart at any sort of depth going into the water. That's not good. Well, I've started driver training my daughter. She just started driver training in the wintertime. And my son started in the fall, but long before snow.
Yeah.
Much better.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about your FSD beta, Tesla full self-driving beta software, needing lines. Well, it's really hard to teach a kid how to drive in the snow, especially when there's like drifts and things, and there's a lane and a half.
Yep.
Like, which lane do you pick? Because the snowplow hasn't come. So it's been interesting. And plus, you got to tell them to 19 out of 20 intersections might be fine to stop at, but the 20th one is like nothing.
It's true, yeah. No, and I
thought my brakes weren't working the other day.
Yeah.
There was nothing.
No, and I have killer winter tires that are studded, and every once in a while there's some intersection where it's like, and
is this it for my Tesla?
Is this it? But yeah, and it's been a bad winter. We've had more snow than usual, and the snow clearing on the roads just isn't good enough. And so the mounds that they plow to the side of the road, they just start growing and growing, and encroaching on the road, and none of it makes any sense. And basically, you have to be psychic to figure out where the lanes are.
Yeah, and it just makes it trickier when you're driving a heavy piece of equipment with a nervous new driver who's trying to. We started with the neighborhood, but the neighborhood was kind of bumpy. Now it's a lot. It's clean. They've cleaned it up a lot. The snow is gone. What else is new with me? There was a hit piece on EVs in Canada's Post Media newspapers. It was a national newspaper chain, the largest one. The premise was that EVs are heavy, and the headline was that if you're safer in an EV, other people will die. basically. It was a rewording of that.
Yeah.
It was probably worse than that, actually. I can't remember the exact title.
But because they're heavier, they're more dangerous is the premise.
Well, yeah, and that was the idea with SUVs when they became popular. You'd see stories like that, too, but it wasn't trashing them. This is trashing them, saying, you're a killer if you choose an EV. It was a hit piece, Brian. And the cherry on top was they posted a Twitter video of a vehicle, I believe, I don't know where it was. It wasn't in North America. It could have been China. It could have been somewhere else. It could have been Europe, hitting 3 pedestrians. So it's turning onto a street and didn't see the pedestrians and went right over them at about maybe 10 miles an hour, something like that. Slow. They got up and walked away. You know, I don't know how hurt they were, but they got up and walked away, and you can't walk away with a broken leg. They sort of rolled off the vehicle. It was kind of an inexplicable accident. And then the writer of this article says, well, imagine if that vehicle was 1,000 pounds heavier. But a slow-moving pedestrian hit doesn't matter what your vehicle weighs because the pedestrians aren't resisting it with their own mass, hardly.
That's right.
It's bull crap. I want to swear in this episode, but we have a letter from someone saying that their whole family listens. So aside from the fact that in Southeast Asia you can't swear in podcasts, we want to penetrate that market and not be banned from Ghana or other apps, then we can't swear. But I want to swear. This show was meant for swearing because it makes me angry.
Yes. Well, I guess, I mean, you could bleep it out. You're the editor.
Yeah, I suppose. I just get the defibrillator writing again and get my heart started up. Kids, it makes Uncle James mad. And Uncle James's heart gets pounding very easily with on command. So, yeah. I've continued car buying, Brian. I've there's been a shocking development in my car buying. Last week on the show, if you remember, I said that I wanted that my Prius, we have a 2017 Prius, reasonable mileage, lower than average, a little bit lower than average. And it's worth a lot of money. It's selling on the dealership lot for almost what we paid for it, or it's listed on the dealership. We saw it the other day because we took the vehicle in and finally got it fixed. We had the catalytic converter unit replaced, and we had to convince them that it was under warranty for a second time because we went through this in November, but it took this long to get the part. But yeah, it happened. It was completely paid for. Nice. But now I want to get rid of the vehicle. Yeah. Because it's getting old. It's 6 years old now. It's almost 6 years old. In the spring, it'll be 6 years old. But it's worth as much as we paid for it almost. So I see this as my little gold mine that can help me get into an EV because I can't normally afford an EV, and EVs are more expensive. So I'm looking for what EV could I get into because the EVs that are currently available aren't great, such as the Chevrolet Bolt, because I know that it's going to go down in price, and I know that the charging speed is ridiculously slow. It's 50 kilowatts. It's really hard to take a highway trip without ruining your day, like an hour each stop at least. You wouldn't want to, worse in the wintertime. So it makes it very challenging to do a highway trip. It's great for in town, but once you get on the highway, it becomes, you really have to have some time to do that. Well, I came to the conclusion that I'll just buy another Prius. They're coming in with this exciting new Prius that's getting all these great reviews, the 2023 Prius. I'm not crazy about the size of it because it's like an inch or two lower, and my head gets stuck trying to get in and out of my wife's car as it is. Like it's really hard. I'm 6 feet, but I got 2 inches on my ass at least. There, I did it again. I said bad things. I'm sorry, kids. I thought, well, maybe we can get a Prius. Not a Prius Prime because those won't come here where we are. They'll go to ZEV states first and provinces, and that'll probably take at least a couple of years. So, yeah. But guess what? The Prius went up in price a huge amount. It's already gone up in price. What? They just put up the 2022 by about $3,000. And the new one is $36,500 in Canada and $28,000 in the U.S., which is $2,400 more in the U.S. than it is right now. So, yeah, it's so that makes that car. I'm getting angry again. Fire up the defibrillator. That feels better. I'm getting angry because the Prius is as much as an EV. Because if you look at the base EVs, you can get a couple of them for around $42,000. You take off in Canada a $5,000 grant, and it's EV. Why? Why would I buy a Prius instead of an EV? The Prius is a compelling car now. They've given it some oomph in the department, in the horsepower department.
Yeah.
It looks a lot better. But
it looks great.
It's not big. I mean, you could practically get an ID4 for that much, a base one, if you could get one, but you can't here. In the States, you can. People in the States, I envy you. You can just walk around and buy an EV at will. In fact, in California and other places, the 2022 Bolt EVs are like $5,000, $5,800 off the already low price.
Yeah.
You're getting this right now. You're getting the $7,500 off the federal grant for a while. They've lowered the price by $6,000, raised it by $900, and now they're taking off for the 2022 models if you can find one. That's basically free, Brian. It's basically free. I don't know why you're not buying one and selling it. It's just ridiculous how cheap they are. That puts them down to like $15,000 for an EV that I have to pay $45,000 for. And that's no fun.
That's crazy.
And also the BS that we're going to talk about later, Toyota and their low EV ambitions. This is crap. And I've declared Toyota dead. They weren't selling many Prii before this. You know that? Because a lot of the people who bought Priuses were early adopters. They moved on to Teslas or other EVs. A lot of them moved to Teslas. That was the number one car that people came from when the Model 3 was released for the first few years. So no one's buying the Prius anymore. They're a fraction of what their sales were. And now they're raising the price by $8,000, $7,000 into the price range of, it's just, this is why you said in the intro that the Toyota CEO is going to step down. Everything's expensive in Canada, Brian. The Ioniq 5 is up $4,000. They're just trying to make it hard for me.
Yeah, well, we talked last week. So the Tesla announced price cuts recently. So the Teslas are getting more affordable, maybe not quite into your price range. And the Mustang Mach-E, they've now dropped the price of that, which is good news.
It's an expensive car, though.
It's still an expensive car, unfortunately.
It's more expensive than the Teslas.
But meanwhile, Volkswagen and Hyundai, I believe, have both said, no, we're not lowering prices. We're not playing that game of chasing low prices. And I assume they're already kind of maybe losing money on every one or just barely making profits. So,
well, if I'm in America, what am I going to buy? Am I going to buy the one that reduced by several $1,000s, the one that didn't? And things are going to change in the middle of March when they supposedly figure out what's going to qualify. Is it enough of it made in America? Is enough of the batteries made in America to qualify? And a lot of them won't. Yeah,
for the Inflation Reduction Act that, the exact details have not been announced, but there'll be some great discounts on some EVs if they're American made in America.
And maybe when that day comes, there'll be better supply in Canada. So I don't know what to do. I tried to contact the Volkswagen dealer in our town here. They didn't get back to me. I asked them, can you order a VW ID4? I looked on Auto Trader to see what the national used inventory was and new. And there's quite a few of them around. They're selling for more than MSRP, so screw that. I could see a day when the Tesla has too many vehicles, when they get production going, and they're down to compete with the ID4 and the Ioniq 5 and EV6 and all those cars in that price range.
Yeah.
And those are a bit bigger.
I should maybe talk to you about that. So, we're hoping to buy a new EV in the next few months that will be longer range. So, in my retirement, I hope to do a lot of road trips. I don't know. I should maybe make you an offer on my Tesla.
Here's the problem with that, Brian, and I thank you for the offer. But here's the problem. Once I commit to a car like that, we're kind of like living paycheck to paycheck. And if something goes wrong, like if the window cracks, God help me, like it's going to be $1 million to fix that puppy. And if the heater goes on that's not under warranty, or the struts or anything like that, part of the deal with the devil we make when we do buy a new car is that we won't have to pay any money aside from the oil changes, which you won't have to do with an EV, which is nice.
No, getting something under warranty might be the way to go for you.
Yeah. But like I said, though, the used prices were briefly trickling down to $45,000 for a while nationally, plus $2,000 delivery. But that's, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be interesting to see what the market will be 2 years from now once they finally start making EVs and Tesla's, all their factories are running at full steam. It's going to be a different market than we have today. But Having said that, I don't want to wait that long. I've got this gold mine in the Prius. The good news is that the Prius will be worth a lot, right? Because the new car is going up in money, which will make it even, that'll help. That'll help my cause.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about, a bunch of Priuses showing up and the market going down because, that I don't think it's going to happen. So even the Bolt EV's up $3,000 compared to what it used to be in Canada. It's been going down, down, down in the States. In Canada, nobody cares about Canada. We have to have legislation, Brian. We have to have zero, mandates, ZEV mandates nationwide, and they have to force these bastards to sell their EVs here. That will help a lot. The VW ID4 right now, the base model, which is new for 2023, is only $500 more than the Bolt EUV. The Bolt EUV is the slightly larger version of the Bolt, which is, mere hundreds of dollars more in price than the base model. So everyone's buying that one. But, you go to Volkswagen and price it out. There's a $2,500 dealer fee that they're adding on. For what? No one knows. It's called a dick fee. Sorry, I'm doing it again. I'm sorry. Families listening to the show, I apologize. A big meanie fee. It's a big meanie fee, and that's bad. And they also have this extraordinary interest rate, which is pushing 9% at Volkswagen. So monthly payment is everything to us. So the financing is important.
Volkswagen does have a lot of very loyal customers. So I think that's what they're banking on by not lowering the prices of their EVs. But also, if they're not making any money on them or they're breaking even, they kind of don't want to sell too many of them.
That's true.
It's a dangerous game they're playing.
But the Volkswagen's pretty nice. I'm going to have a little comparison here between the Bolt EUV and the ID4 base model. Now, the ID4 has received a lot of criticism. Most of it has to do with the infotainment system, which is a bit laggy. But that's something that maybe can be fixed in software updates. It's not a death sentence. It's not the end of the world, but people have really complained about it. Anyway, the Bolt EUV, all of the Chevy Bolts only charge at 55 kilowatts on the highway. Now you're looking at an hour and a half to charge your vehicle on the highway. That takes a long time.
Yeah.
And the ID4 base model charges, it was slower before, and now charges at 140 kilowatts. So that's more, it's almost 2.5 times as much. Like, it's pretty significant. It's hard to tell what the peak charging is. You have to go by what happens over the whole course of it. And that's a little bit confusing. I watched out of Spec Reviews a video last night. They did a cold soak charging test on two identical ID4s at 39% state of charge. I think it was about minus 17, something like that, Celsius. It was pretty darn cold for Denver. And they did a test where they did a half hour of normal, easy driving in one car. His girlfriend did that. And he bagged the other car, basically jolting forward and then heavy regenerative braking. So you're charging the battery when you're when you're turning on the regenerative braking at full force. So you're going back and forth like this. But he charged at almost the full rate when he got to the charger, and she charged at only 30.
Yeah,
because their battery was cold. So
it had warmed up the battery by driving like crazy.
There's no preconditioning on those models like there is on a Tesla, where you can, type in your supercharger and it'll preheat for half an hour or whatever it deems necessary. Use some of the battery and some of the range doing that, but then you charge much faster, it makes a big difference. I mean, if you're traveling in the summer, it's usually easy unless you're in a Leaf and things overheat. So in the Bolt, we have around 400 kilometers of range and only 333 kilometers of range in the new base ID4. But there's this whole argument over battery size and charging speed, right? Like, I mean, if your battery charged in 10 seconds, you could have like 100 kilometer range and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. There's this trade-off between the speed of charging and your range. And you can sometimes tell that by using an app called a Better Route Planner, which is every EV owner uses, because you can plan your trip and see how long the charging stops will be. However, they don't have the new ID4s in there. I think a lot of these things are European centric, and they don't like that one that tells you the cold weather range. That's European centric. They don't even have the Bolt in there.
Yep.
So it's frustrating because I can't really see what my day trip to Calgary is, but I'll talk to you about that in a second. The advantages of the Bolt are a power driver's seat. Do you like those, Brian?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. It's not a huge thing. It's not a deal breaker though, is it?
Oh, no.
It's kind of nice. Here's some value that you get with the Bolt. They throw in a home charger, especially if you buy the Bolt EV. It will give you a 240 volt home charger. I don't think the ID4 comes with any charger, not even level 110, which most cars do. So yeah, but you can buy one for $450 if you buy the base Bolt. There's no adaptive cruise, however, in the Bolt, which I like. Do you like adaptive cruise? Not a Tesla?
I love it. Yeah, it'd be hard to go without it now.
Yeah, we've had it in for 5.5 years in our latest Toyota, and it's like that just seems like it should be part of the thing now. But you can't even option it unless you buy the most expensive trims of the Bolt EUV. So yeah, that's a problem. And here's another value added for the Bolt. They will give you a level 2 charging install up to $1,500. So they will supposedly, and people have had a lot of trouble setting these things up, but they will come get an electrician to give you a charger. Now I should have room for one because I did an upgrade with the solar panels and the charger in the driveway. And there's no heat pump option in the Bolts. Did you know that? There's no even option for the heat pump in the Bolts. It's just
okay.
Yeah, the warranty on the battery is 8 years, 5 years on the powertrain. Here's the nice things about the Volkswagen ID4. It's bigger, Yeah, it's basically a hatchback pretending to be a small SUV, the Bolt, but it's a small crossover, the ID4. So it gives you 21 tanks of free fast charging for the first 4 years. Now that can add up to a fair bit of money, can it? I mean, what would you pay for like a 0 to 100 charge?
At a supercharger, it'd be like around $15.
Okay, well, that adds up. It's probably more for non-Tesla people, so it would probably be 20 times $20. So that's a fair bit of money. And there's the heated windshield that I keep talking about, Brian, and my wife likes that idea too. Love that idea of electrically heated windshield. What a great idea.
Yeah, because the wipers always get chunked with ice around here.
So adaptive cruise control, standard, love that. It's got roadside display. Do you think that's worthwhile? Because you have that in the Tesla.
Oh, it's great. It's not 100% accurate, so you have to be a little bit careful sometimes. Right. But I often find myself wondering, hey, what's the speed limit? And you just look on the screen.
Yeah, I would imagine myself doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It's got dual zone climate control, which is nice. That's a nice base feature to have. That's kind of a deluxe feature that you don't find even nowadays. 4 years of remote access, which is no longer included. 10 years was included. Now nothing is included on the Bolt in Canada. It's a much bigger vehicle, as I said. The infotainment system is 2 inches larger. That makes a difference, doesn't it? I mean, you think it doesn't, but it does.
Oh, yeah. No, bigger is always better.
And almost, get this, 2 times the cargo capacity. Like it's got a crap load more cargo capacity in the... and they're basically the same price. Remember, we're comparing these two things. In Canada... Yeah. It's a big difference in the States, but in Canada, where I'm shopping right now, it's stupid. But yeah, lots of people are shopping. And by the way, people, a lot of our listeners have bought EVs. If you've bought an EV, send us a picture. Yeah, I'd like to retweet that and just say, our listener from so-and-so place bought this. And yeah, I think that'd be great. Plus, we just love to see what's going on with you guys. And then the problem with the Chevy is that they've got this Equinox coming that's going to be cheaper, and it's going to charge at 170, supposedly. You never know with these things, Brian, because sometimes they'll lie to you. They'll just change their mind.
And you don't have a lot of experience yet with the fast charging network around where we live. We know the Tesla network works great, but you would definitely have to kind of do the research and see how reliable it is.
Yeah, I noticed they're putting up a lot of 50 kilowatt chargers around, and that's no good. That's what you put at a grocery store, where you're going to spend an hour.
Grocery store. Yeah.
Or someplace where you're spending time like that. But you don't put those up, or even workplaces, but you don't put them up on the highway because that's not going to do it. It's a waste of money. I mean, they can repurpose them. They're not going to throw them in the garbage, I hope, but it's kind of dumb that that's what they're doing. Oh, by the way, the ID4 just won an award in Canada for the best value EV in Canada, which I think I have to agree with that. It's basically the same price as the Bolt, but in the US, the Bolt is $10,000 US cheaper, which is, $1 million Canadian dollars. And that's where I'm at, man. I don't know. Do you have any advice? Do you have the solution to my problem?
No.
Okay. The quest for an EV continues. If anyone out there has some tips, I'm getting a lot of bad feedback on Facebook that they're saying 18 months. So what good does that do me? A Prius isn't going to be worth anything in 18 months. I got to do something. I got to make a move, man. Oh, I got to start here, the show, with a future prediction, okay? My prediction is that when robo-taxi fleets become a thing, they're going to say, okay, we need 100 cars for our fleet for this size of city, okay? Say a small city, small town even, 100 cars. I think they're going to buy 200. And the reason is because they only last so many miles. They might last 1 million miles each, but they're always driving. Yeah. So if you buy twice as many, you extend that fleet twice as long, but you can have them charging.
Sure.
And feeding the grid. So you're making money that way. The economic sense is going to be to buy 2, maybe even 3 times as many cars. So factor that into your stock buying when you think about how many cars are going to go into any particular robo-taxi fleet.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead then to a story about New York City, which has now introduced new rules that Uber and Lyft must be zero emission in New York City by 2030. This is a new rule that has just been announced. I read about it in The Guardian. If you're going to force certain vehicles to go electric, it makes sense to have fleets like that be the first to do it. If you're going to force somebody to be electric, because those are, like you say, cars that are on the road, 24/7. And imagine all the exhaust emissions you could save if all of the Ubers, Lyfts, and then perhaps taxis as well, especially in a crowded place like New York City. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. Those should be the first ones to go all electric.
And as younger people replace older people in society, more and more people are going to, have less cars, which you don't really have in New York anyway, in Manhattan. But also you're going to be more apt to use an app and use a ride-sharing service. So I think the percentage by 2030 is even going to be higher than it is today. So there's going to be even bigger advantage in 2030 than there is today.
Absolutely.
Brian, I listened to a pro-nuclear podcast the other day. It's a podcast that I listen to called The Energy Gang. Sometimes I listen to it. It's got mostly insiders and policy people on it. It's a bit dry for your average audience, but their audience has been egging them on to talk about nuclear. And you know how there's a lot of people out there. I don't know if anyone still listens to our show because I've been saying bad things for a long time. A lot of pro-nuclear people. My son, I've got a nephew that's pro-nuclear. Nuclear. And a lot of people argue about it on Twitter too. So the idea, like I said last week, and as I mocked my son, was that you have this problem where you have to decarbonize. Well, we have this technology that can put out vast amounts of electricity without carbon.
Yeah.
It's not that simple. You see, there hasn't been much nuclear done since the early 80s, right? Worldwide. I mean, we've seen the Vogtle 2 reactors being added in Georgia, and it's been, I don't know, what is it, a decade overdue, and billions and billions and billions, like twice as much as it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because they haven't done it in so long. And because of, the accident in Japan and other accidents, ever since Chernobyl, actually, that the money, it's all safety. Like all the money, the expense of this is safety.
Yeah.
So if you make them cheap, you are compromising safety. A lot of people are worried about that. But here's the base of it. We have to decarbonize the world's electrical grid, make it net zero by 2035. That's a little over 10 years from now. It's 12 years less a month, okay? That is no time at all. You can't even, unless you have a worldwide consensus to go nuclear to solve that problem yesterday, and you are ready to go with it tonight, you still probably won't meet it because a lot of those projects aren't going to be done in 12 years. Maybe none of them, because we're still getting up to speed on it. When we hear the pro-nuclear people, the people who work in nuclear, talk about how we have to do this, it has to be part of the mix. There's no other option. We can't rely on storage. They called it dreams in this podcast. I'm going to play a bunch of clips from it if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Because I want people to hear what that side of the story is, but how hearing their side of the story made me have more doubts about nuclear. So they basically admit, they admit in the podcast that nuclear can't help us reach net zero by 2035. 2050, yes. That's when everything has to be decarbonized. And you can use nuclear for heat. You can, heat a city if you build a city with pipes under it, and it comes from a nuclear reactor heating molten salt water or something.
Sure.
There's different things that they can do and maybe even industrial applications, but nuclear is not going to solve our problem. So if you're pro-nuclear, you're like throwing in the towel on solving climate change because it's not realistic. Even the people who are there working on it and are all for it say the same thing, that you can't do it. They don't like to talk about it. It's mumbled under their breath, but they've said those words, and I'll have those words for you. Okay, so they've claimed that they've learned from the mistakes of the Vogtle 2 reactor in Georgia, I don't think it's not even running yet. There's still delays, cost overruns, time overruns. We've discussed it numerous times on the show. This is Katie Huff, head of the Office of Nuclear Energy at the Department of Energy in the United States.
But we've learned so much in building those plants, learned about making sure that the design is fully complete before it's starting work, making sure that you have enough craftspeople in your region, skilled trade workers and craftspeople, union workers, to do the work of electricians and boilermakers and welders and everything that's required, construction union labor, to actually build a plant. Taking a design to an on-the-grid power plant is an incredible endeavor that we haven't done at scale since the sort of decades between the 70s and 90s.
And that's kind of the problem. We don't have trained workers. There's no workforce. They have to learn. They have to build and then learn. So one generation of nuclear before you can learn anything and train a workforce, well, that's a decade and a half at least. And then by then, game over. So you can't throw in the towel. We don't need to throw in the towel. That's my problem with it. Renewables will solve the problem. And no one wants to admit that because nuclear seems like it's it's also more expensive, but who cares, right? I mean, who cares? It's already significantly more expensive. Here she is admitting that they can't, in fact, get nuclear to decarbonize electricity by 2035 for a 1.5 degree world. And getting there even in 2050 would take an effort like the nuclear boom in the 70s. It's been done before, but it would take a Herculean effort just to get there by 2050.
I mean, leave aside, as you say, everything else is going on with renewables and storage and the progress that has to happen there. Just think about the nuclear piece of that then. So to double the nuclear capacity on the US grid over that time period. So that's what, basically by 2035, you're saying? So 12 years or so now. Is that really achievable? And if so, how?
I think we probably can get there by 2050. And the doubling, would be by 2050 to get to that net zero. But it is certainly the case that we would have to work as fast as we have ever worked. So between 1970 and 1990, the United States built 95 gigawatts electric of nuclear capacity. And that is precisely the amount that we're going to have to add in order to double. Plus, we have to either extend the licenses of our existing fleet in such a way that they will make it to 2050, and not all reactors will pass the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's, high standards for those license extensions all the way to 100 years, right? We do expect some reactors will shut down. And so we will need to build even more than that 95 gigawatts in the next 25 years. So we have to build them as quickly as we did in the highest rate that we ever have in the United States, but about the same. It's not so far out of the realm of possibility because we have done it before.
But keep in mind, that's for 2050. And if they did that, you'd think the whole world would be saying, okay, we're going nuclear, get people trained, start schools. There's nuclear plumbers. There's all kinds of different technicians. This is part of the problem why France has half of the nuclear capacity, because there's nobody trained to fix the things.
Yeah.
They're finding it a hard time that, the maintenance can't go on because nuclear is not a thing anymore. I'm sorry. It hasn't been in a long time. There was a sort of a renaissance in the early 2000s, and then, the Japan accident happened. And the reason why there was a renaissance was for the same reasons. Well, I think if they might have had a shot at having a lot more nuclear then. I don't know. But anyway.
And keeping some of them online, the existing ones, makes sense. And we've talked about that before. But as mentioned in that clip, they're not all going to be up to safety specs. So we don't necessarily want to do that.
And Katie really pointed at one thing in particular, and it's the reason why in France you have the troubles we have, is we've sent 20 to 30 years of signals to the youth that we're getting out of nuclear. So you cannot be surprised when we no longer have nuclear welders or draftsmen, and that's what's happening in France. They're not saying, oh, the reactors are not operational, so let's put in question the technology. What they're saying is two things. First, we cannot keep saying to students that we're not going to be. And that's why, really, Katie was at the forefront as a university professor helping build that workforce, which is single-handedly the most important thing.
Yeah, that's Carl Perez. And here's Katie Huff again talking about the current state of nuclear projects that are hoping if successful, to be commercially available in the early 2030s. And that's near D-Day. So it's kind of scary to think of that.
If successful, we have 3 DOE cost-shared projects that will build commercial nuclear plants in the United States. One is a 6-pack of NuScale reactors that's targeting the end of the decade. Another is the TerraPower Natrium reactor, again, targeting around 2030, possibly a little bit later, depending on risks around fuel. And a third is the X-Energy XE100 high-temperature gas reactor, again, targeting, around the end of this decade. And those 3 cost-shared projects are going to be commercial on the grid when they reach their deadlines, all around that 2030 timeframe. And so we're really looking at all those types of reactors being, in the commercial sector by then. The real challenge is, the ones that will move fast enough in the scaling sense are the ones that are going to be building up their order books today.
We talk about energy insecurity and how nuclear can solve that. That's why there's more interest in nuclear, and that's why these people are optimistic about it. But when you hear them talk, you almost sound like when they hear themselves speak that they realize that, this is BS, that it's really not going to work. But we're a lot of stuff is dependent on Russia. So, I mean, you can stockpile, as they say in this clip, but you still need materials from other countries.
If you're dependent on Russia for those supplies, that seems to me to be a huge problem. Am I right to think that? I mean, is it as big of a problem as it sounds? And if it is a problem, how do you get around it?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. About 20% of the enriched uranium that we use to feed our existing fleet in the United States is Russian enriched, right? And we would really like to get back to a place where the United States can at least fill its own needs from trusted suppliers. In order to do that, it'll take an investment in our fuel cycle and potentially import restrictions. But we're in a place ultimately where the most important thing will be investments in that fuel cycle that expand the existing capacity for enrichment here in the United States and among our allies. That thankfully is a sort of slow moving process because of those slow fuel cycles, and because of the very small amounts, you can store large amounts of inventory of nuclear fuel in a way that is less just in time as like the natural gas or other petroleum markets, for example. Nuclear reactors can store, many years of fuel on site, which makes them very energy secure.
And that's true if you do store them, but you have, are the private companies going to do that? Basically, they're talking about investment. That's not happening either. They need investment for these things as well. This is Carl Perez talking about how it's, the programs are 20 years. Everything is a 20-year thing.
Just keep on investing in this technology, and it's going to be a long-term investment. Many of the countries that are benefiting from nuclear, we're looking at 20-year programs. So we cannot look for immediate gratification when it comes to these type of decisions.
Fail. It's horrifying to think that so many people think nuclear is the solution. But they don't understand the Paris Agreement. They don't understand what we need and what we need to do and what it means if we don't do it, if we go beyond a 1.5 degree world. I mean, the world is already ugly weather-wise, climate-wise. It's already, it's crazy.
Yeah.
We don't need to go any further than that.
Well, we haven't so far been able to convince people of the urgency of it with 3 years of podcasts. But it's super urgent and we have to move fast. And that's not something that people are really used to in this world.
And don't think it's about going out and buying an EV and recycling your trash. It's about government policy. It's about the world. We have no time for individual efforts for changing behavior. It has to be done on a grand scale. There is no time for nuclear at all. There's not. It's not even, we're not even talking about price today. We talked about price most of the time. There's no time for it. We have 12 years less a month. Extending the life of current plants, good idea. Do it. Should you build more reactors next to existing? Maybe that's an idea. I don't know if there's cost savings on that, but you have to pay the price. People in this podcast said that nuclear would make things cheaper. And they said that they don't care about the price of things. What they care about is your power bill. But what that means is the government's paying for the electricity that brings down your power bill. If they're paying for the nuclear plant, of course your power bill is going to go down because it's not your power bill it's paying for. It's not your utility.
Yeah,
but you are paying for it.
Up, yeah.
Everyone's paying taxes. So nothing's free. There's no free lunch there, people. SMR, they said in this podcast, has to be large scale, which we all know, in order to have cost savings, because it's not. So you have to have the first ones come online in the 30s. Then you have to learn from those mistakes and train people.
And replicate.
By then, boom, too late.
Yeah.
But then at that point, you build a factory, one factory, not competing factories. You have efficiencies of scale, and that might be useful. It may still be part of the mix at one day for the North, for mines and things like that. And cheaper is not safer. The high cost of nuclear power is almost entirely due to safety. And there's a lot of carbon emissions from it too. It's just, there's no time. Just familiarize yourself with what needs to be done and when with climate next time you go on about nuclear.
Okay, so we got another obsolete energy technology to talk about. A couple of stories about coal, which is remarkable it still even exists at all, that we make electricity by burning coal. A story from Bloomberg here: replacing U.S. coal plants with solar and wind is cheaper than running them. So this is something we've talked about before. From the article here, nearly all existing U.S. coal plants require more cash to operate than the cost of replacing them with new wind or solar projects, according to a report from the San Francisco-based climate think tank Energy Innovation.
This is like 99%, Brian, in the United States.
Yes.
It's almost all of them.
It's almost all of them, and the findings are backed up by Bloomberg NEF, New Energy Finance. They did a similar study and found the exact same thing. So where we live, there is still coal burning for electricity generation. And no, it doesn't even make sense to even keep it running, even the stuff that already exists. This is a point we've been expecting to get to, and apparently that point is here now.
Yeah, and just to be fair, though, in Canada, it's probably different because we need more solar. The cost of solar is higher because we need more of it to generate the same amount because of shorter winter days and things like that.
And the other issue here is the Inflation Reduction Act in the U.S. This is the thing that's sort of spiking it and putting it over the top. It would have maybe taken a little bit longer if it wasn't for that massive influx in cash, but the bill is doing what it's supposed to do. It's encouraging clean technology, which ends up discouraging dirty technology. So your government at work.
Well, let's get to the tweet of the week. This is from Asad Razuk. Cost overruns of mega projects and another reason why solar and wind are winning. This is all the different power generation and the average cost overruns of mega projects. Nuclear storage is at 238%. That is the cost to store, or you have to store nuclear after it's spent. There are interesting options for spent rods now for recycling them, but still, eventually you have to store them, and it's usually 230% more than anticipated. Nuclear power is 120% more. So if something is $10 billion, it ends up being $22 billion, if my math is correct, Brian.
Yeah.
Hydro is 75% more. Fossil power, 16%. Wind power is 13% more. Energy transmission lines, 8% more, and solar is only 1% more. So that's interesting.
Yeah, solar's, I guess, the most predictable of all these energy technologies to deploy, which is good news.
Yeah, when more about when the sun is going to shine than how much the wind is going to pull. They actually have more data on that. That's just one little part of that. Tweet number 2, I'm going to throw this in. This is from Jigar Shah, the U.S. Department of Energy. Once a FOAK project is executed successfully at $6,200 per kilowatt, subsequent SMRs would be expected to come down the cost curve to $3,600 per kilowatt hour after 15 to 20 deployments. Yeah, so that's how long it would take. 15 to 20. That's going to take a long time, Brian. The first one's not there. It's years away from being there.
Yeah, because we're kind of starting again with nuclear, we've got to build a whole one first and then learn from it. And just building the first one is 10 or 15 years.
By the way, they also said on the podcast that most of the people interested in nuclear want big projects. They want full nuclear reactors. They don't want the little ones. So that's an issue too. The U.S. would need 300 additional trained workers with technical and non-technical skill sets to construct and operate 200 gigawatts of advanced nuclear. I'm going to skip through that quickly. But also I learned this week that Chinese homes are burning coal in their homes. I didn't know that. There's a lot I don't know about China. You've been to China.
Yeah.
I blame you for not telling me.
But I was in Beijing, which was a very modern city. I wouldn't have expected anything like that from what I experienced of it. But, it's a vast country with lots of different smaller cities, which is probably, or countries.
Yeah, the coal cities are primarily the ones that are near coal mines. So a slew of northern Chinese cities covered under China's Hawaii River policy, which since the 1950s have provided subsidized coal for indoor heating. Not only have they used coal, they subsidized it to heat indoor homes north of the Hawaii River, where temperatures fall far below freezing. Probably nothing like they are here, but cold. The country burns around 300 million metric tons of coal just for heating houses every year, and that's 7% of annual coal production in China goes into individual homes. Now, they have a program right now where they're switching over to natural gas. I say, switch over to electricity, get it done. Why do the thing that's going to go away anyway?
Why do the interim step? Yeah. But you and I are probably old enough that there were probably people burning coal in their homes here when we were kids, I would guess.
Brian, I'm officially ex-naying the lightning round this week. I apologize. It'll be back next week. It was a short one anyway. We'll hold some of that over to next week. I want to dip into the mailbag here. We have feedback from Galax, Virginia again. This is Ryan.
Aloha, James and Brian. This is Ryan from Galax, Virginia. Just calling to return and report regarding the solar farm that is going up in our area. We had gone to the community meeting last month. The name of the company that is doing this project in our area is called River Trail Solar LLC. They are part of a larger company, Energix Renewables, that is doing a lot of solar and clean energy projects. So they appear to be moving forward with this project. They're going through some final stages of permitting, and hopefully they'll be breaking ground and starting to build later this year. We just wanted to also say thank you again for all the information that you provide each week and the work that goes into that. Our family listens diligently. I had mentioned briefly at my last message that we had an Ioniq 5. It turns out for my work in home health, it wasn't quite enough range, so I got a Tesla Model 3. I went with the Tesla. We are loving it and enjoying supporting clean energy. Mahalo.
Thank you, Ryan. And if you want to leave us a message like he did, speakpipe.com/clean energy show. We love getting messages. Thank you, Ryan, for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Last time you talked about this project, I couldn't find any mention of it online. Nothing. And now I've got a few hits. Not a lot, but I'm actually raised some eyebrows to me. And hello to your family, by the way, for listening. Thank you. I apologize if I got a little angry earlier, but it's a heated, problematic topic we talk about sometimes. 339 acres for a small community solar farm right in Galax by their, the parent company is Israeli, and they've come under some suspicions and problems. And the Virginia Human Rights Council is issued a press release against them saying, deceptive practices of Energix Renewable Energy. Multiple Virginia companies have petitioned the state and multiple authorities to withhold permits from them. This is from Yahoo Finance, which picked up on the press release. $1.8 billion in 35-year Energix revenue has been stalled or canceled. So it sounds like these guys could be not legit or
interesting,
not together. So I would be worried if, they hired them. It's kind of on like a monorail. They're going around to smaller, centers and selling them things that maybe they shouldn't be sold. I don't know. I was a little bit worried about that, but there's not very much information on it. They might be trying to avoid investor and community backlash. It says Energix is misleading communities about its track record by filing materially misleading notices of intent or filing them late in the state permitting process.
Well, I hope it works out.
Eric Wolski in California writes, hi, Brian and James. I was surprised to see this fully electric Ford Transit van at my Walmart grocery store. I don't remember seeing any kind of announcement by Walmart. I think we covered it. I think we did.
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, it sounds familiar to me. I can't look through the files and find it, but Anyway, good news, says Eric. Thank you, Eric, for writing to us. And he sent us a couple of pictures of, it's really nice to see. They're parked in the Walmart parking lot. They're Ford Transit vans, but they're, say, 100% electric on the sides, which is obviously what we want. Brian, we love to hear from our listeners. The best way to contact us, if you're not brave enough to leave us a SpeakPipe message, is cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And we've got a YouTube channel, and we've got all kinds of presence on social media, especially TikTok, where our handles are @CleanEnergyPod. And if you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast app to get new episodes delivered every week. And thanks again to our listeners who have donated to us by pressing on the donate button in the show notes. We'll see you again next week, everyone.
See you next week.